Break out those timelines and let your knowledge shine. It's been a week, so let's see what you learned. Eden Hope Academy.
Hello, welcome to week 3. Are you ready to start? I'm so glad you're here. We are going to start on week 3, and we're going to discuss first the memorize me part. So we're going to start with, now I know the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving strength of his right hand. Psalm 26. So what does that mean? That means that God is always with you, that he is always protecting you and always saving you. So in the box right over here, I want you to draw a picture of you and your family being protected by God. The next part is our history, and it says, can you read this with me? You start, okay? Did you read the Navigation Act of 1651, Currency Act, Molasses Act, Sugar Act, Iron Act, Currency Act again, Stamped Act, Quartering Act, Declaratory Act, Townsend Acts, Tea Acts, and finally the Intolerable Acts of 1774, were all enacted by British Parliament. Colonists cried taxation without representation. Can you cry that? Taxation without representation. So what do these mean? Well, let's think about it. We have an act was something that Congress, their parliament is what they call it, that they would say, this is what we decree. This is what you must do. These are the rules you must follow. And so every time molasses came into the colonies had to pay a tax on it. So if they bought a pound of molasses, they would have to give a certain amount of money to the king for every amount of molasses they bought. And same for sugar and any type of paper products like newspaper, they would put a stamp on that. And so that became the Stamp Act. So anything like paper products would be stamped, and you would have to pay the stamp price in order to buy the newspaper. It was another tax. And then Quartering Acts was especially distressing to the colonists, because what it was there were a lot of soldiers left over from the French and Indian War whom King George decided to keep in the colonies, and they needed places to stay. So literally you could be in your house that you built and you paid for with your chickens outside and maybe your goats outside, and you could hear a knock at the door, and it would be a soldier, and he would say, we're going to take over your house and we're going to live here for several months. And they could eat all of your food and drink all of your drinks and use your beds and everything, and they could just take over your entire house, and you got no compensation, no money for it, and you just basically lost the use of your house for a very long period of time. And that was just not okay with many colonists. It probably wouldn't be okay with us today. And so the colonists got very upset about this, and they were crying taxation without representation. We should have people in Parliament who represent us and say our side of the story. But King George did not see it that way, because he had just paid a lot of money for the French and Indian War. And what he was thinking was, these are his colonists. This is part of his land. They need to obey him. And beyond that, he just spent all this money, so they should be the ones to repay him. And that's the way he saw it. So it caused a lot of tension between the two of them. Another thing King George did was, after winning the French and Indian War, he told the colonists that even though he had won all of this land in the Ohio Valley, that they couldn't use it. They were going to stay right where their original boundaries were. And the colonists were growing, and they wanted to really expand westward. And so they did it anyway, against what the king had told them to do. And so you can see with these starting up the tensions that are rising that are going to lead to the war. So next we have Englishman Thomas Newcomen invented the steam engine. And that was so revolutionary, because what used to have taken hours and hours and hours to do was now just taking a very short amount of time. And I have videos right up there if you look from your mom's letter, and they will give you some examples of how steam engines work. And then we're going to make our own steam engine in class this week. And finally we have this is when the Revolutionary War really starts. And what we memorize is the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, and it's in the wee hours, that means in the very dark, of April 19th. Was anyone born on April 19th? If you were, email me below and let me know, and I'll put it on Facebook if you were born on the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere Day. April 19th, 1775, British General Gage sent regiments of British soldiers to Lexington to capture Sam Adams and John Hancock. Well, we're going to learn in just a minute that Sam Adams was the founder of the Sons of Liberty, and he was in charge of the Boston Tea Party, of dumping a whole bunch of tea into the Boston Harbor. And John Hancock was a wealthy merchant, and he was very instrumental in the Declaration of Independence. He wrote his name really big on the Declaration of Independence. And he was very much a thinker of the American Revolution. And he was therefore sought by King George. And King George would have probably either jailed him or worse, jailed both of them or worse if they had caught him, if they'd caught them. But he didn't catch him. Do you guys know how? Did you listen to the video or the music? Well, that night, on April 19, 1775, there was a plan that spies would determine how the generals were coming, because they didn't know what day they were coming. They just knew that they were coming. And so they chose to have a plan that they would put lanterns in the North Church of Boston, which is still there today. And if Gage was coming by sea, they would put 2 lanterns up. And so Paul Revere saw this and was woken up, and he knew that they were coming by sea, so he galloped miles and miles and miles through the countryside screaming, "The British are coming." And there were other riders with Paul Revere, but we tend to remember Paul Revere as the person who did that and went and told people what was happening. So, are you a Paul Revere? Would you go out and warn people? I bet you are. So here we have the Boston Tea Party. So we just changed the page. Are you on this page with me? I bet you are. And the Boston Tea Party was started by Sam Adams, and the tea tax had just come in, and the colonists were very upset about this because the tea wasn't even manufactured in England. It was manufactured in India or China. And so the colonists were like, why are we paying English taxes on something that wasn't even manufactured in England? They were not happy about it. And so Sam Adams and his group of people dressed as Mohawk Indians. So they pretended like they were Indians, and they boarded the Beaver, the Dartmouth, and the Eleanor. They were 3 ships. And they dumped 342 chests of tea into the Atlantic Ocean, right at Boston Harbor. And right after they did that, they swept the decks clean because they didn't want to be seen as wild men. They wanted to be seen as respectable colonists dressed like Indians who were destroying property. So yeah, that made sense. But they swept the decks clean. So what I want you to do is draw pictures of the colonists dressed like Indians, and you can even, like, one person should definitely be sweeping the decks clean, because I just think that's such a funny, peculiar part of that story. So then you have a timeline card. So you have your timeline card ready? So I'm going to write week number 3, and I'm going to use gold pen. Are you guys using fun pens? I'm going to write week number 3, card number 1, right here. Did you guys write that? And I'm going to write Boston Tea Party. And later I'm going to write, I kind of wrote it incorrectly. So I'm not going to show you this. And then I'm going to write the date, and then I'm going to draw a really cool picture of maybe tea boxes or tea crates floating in the Atlantic Ocean. And then on the back of it, I'm going to just write a couple of sentences that say maybe Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty dressed as Mohawks and dumped tea into the Boston Harbor. I'll put that on the screen. And then on my link it, what do you think we should put for link it here? Definitely the Boston Tea Party goes in the middle circle. But then I'm definitely gonna put Sam Adams, and I'm gonna link him directly to Sons of Liberty. And then I'm gonna put 342, is that how many there were? 342 chests of tea getting dumped into the Atlantic. So I think I'm gonna do the Sam Adams, Sons of Liberty, and then tea right here, because they all go together. And then maybe dressed as Mohawk Indians and swept the decks. That like completes this whole area right there. But what led to it? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to think. So you could connect this to the French and Indian War. You could connect it to, what else could you connect it to? King George, John Hancock, because you know they knew each other. You could connect it to the tea tax. So think of all the things you can connect it to. And remember, you don't have to fill out all those dots, just a few of them. And I think it's interesting, I didn't mention over here, because I didn't think about it at the moment, of that midnight riot of Paul Revere. That happened in 1775, and the Tea Party happened in 1773. So we know that King George was probably looking for Sam Adams because he was still a little ticked off about the Tea Party too. So we're going to go on to our next card. Oh, and was anyone born on December 16th? Because that was Boston Tea Party Day. So if you were, make sure you email me below so I can put your picture, your cartoon up, and say that you were born on Boston Tea Party Day. Okay? So our next card is going to be week 3, card number 2. You got that? And on the back, I'm going to say the First Continental Congress drafts the rights and grievances. So we're going to talk about that right here. And basically, so you're going to write the First Continental Congress right here. And that was basically a group of some of the leaders from every colony, or most colonies, not every colony was represented. And they met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they discussed what they felt like King George was doing. And so they drafted this document to tell King George, these are the things that we do not appreciate that you're doing, and this is what we think you should do about it. And so they sent that document to King George. So it was kind of the precursor to the Declaration of Independence. So when we think of any historical thing that happens, we need to remember that there's always something that preceded it. It never just spontaneously generates. An event never just spontaneously happens. There's always something before it that led to it. And at Eden Hope Academy, we are always thinking about those things so that when we occur something way back here, we can say, you know, I've seen something like this happen, and I know it can lead to something much bigger. So I think I can stop here and decide what the best course of action is right here, instead of just letting it go on and getting worse, or even sometimes getting better. So it's something to always remember what we're doing in history. So for the rights and grievances, I'll put up a card, and I would put rights and grievances, maybe precursor to the Declaration of Independence, and maybe some of our founding fathers, and that they met in Philadelphia. And you could link that to William Penn, because Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania. Pretty cool, huh? I bet you were thinking that already though, right? Okay, so our last one is the Battle of Bunker Hill, and that was in 1775. Was anyone born in 1775? No, I don't think so. No, some of your mamas might have been born in 1975. So ask them if they were. Email me, and we'll put them on our Facebook page. Okay, so the Battle of Bunker Hill actually didn't take place on Bunker Hill at all. It took place kind of there, but it took place on another hill altogether. And I'm going to put that right there. And what happened was the British were coming, and the colonists knew it, and they were finally at a point where they were fighting for their rights. They were fighting for what they thought that they should do, which is to have independence from England. And so the British had all kinds of ships out in Boston Harbor. And that night, the night before the battle started, the colonists spent the entire night, and they took flat land and they built a 6-foot berm. So I want you guys to ask your mom how big 6 feet is.